At Morixa Tales, we believe in the power of storytelling. Our scripts weave together deep emotions and dramatic turns to deliver justice where it is most needed. Experience captivating mysteries where the truth eventually shines through, leaving a lasting impact on your heart and mind.
My 8th ultrasound appointment started normally, until the nurse, the doctor's sister, looked at my file and her face changed. She pulled me to the side, locked the door, and her body began to tremble. "I can't keep this secret anymore," she said, her voice shaking. "Your husband paid me $50,000. I asked, "Paid you for what?" When she showed me the payment documents, the receipts, the emails between my husband and others, I realized I had never truly known the man I married. Everything I trusted was a lie, and that was just the beginning. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. If you're loving this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Drop a comment below and tell us your name and where you're watching from. We'd love to know. Quick heads up, while this story is inspired by real events, we've changed names, details, and locations for privacy and storytelling purposes. But trust us, the truth behind it is absolutely real. The examination room smelled like it always did, antiseptic and sterile, with that faint chemical undertone that made me want to hold my breath. But not today. Today I was 8 months pregnant and I could barely notice anything beyond the flutter of movement in my belly. My baby, our baby. I'd been coming to Brigham and Women's Hospital for prenatal appointments for months now, and this routine checkup felt like any other. Doctor Patterson usually saw me, but she'd mentioned she'd be away this week. No problem. The clinic had excellent doctors. I'd trusted their judgment when Nathan insisted we come here. He'd researched it thoroughly, he'd said. The best facility for what we needed. The ultrasound technician who greeted me was younger than Doctor Patterson, early 30s maybe, with warm brown eyes and a gentle smile. Emma, her name tag read. She made small talk as she helped me into the examination gown, asked about my due date, whether the baby was moving a lot. Normal questions. Comfortable questions. "Everything's looking great so far," Emma said as she applied the gel to my belly. The cold sensation made me shiver slightly, but I was used to it by now. I leaned back on the recline chair, eager to see my baby again on the monitor. 8 months in, and that never got old, the transducer moved across my skin in that familiar pattern. Emma's eyes tracked the screen, her expression concentrated but pleasant. But then something shifted. I noticed it immediately, a slight pause, a barely perceptible change in her breathing. Her eyes narrowed just slightly as she stared at the monitor. "Everything okay?" I asked, though I tried to keep my voice light. Paranoia was something I'd learned to recognize in myself over the past few months. "Let me just..." Emma's voice trailed off. She kept the transducer in place, but her free hand moved to the file on the tray beside us. My file. She opened it and glanced at the cover. Her jaw tightened. I saw it happen the exact moment her eyes landed on something that made her pause. Nathan's name, printed right there at the top. Emma's hands began to tremble. It was barely noticeable, but I caught it. The transducer wavered slightly against my skin. Her breathing became shallow. She looked down at my file, then at the monitor, then back at the file. Her eyes moved back and forth like she was trying to reconcile something that didn't add up. "Mrs. Thornton?" she said quietly, setting down the transducer with trembling fingers. Her voice had changed, no longer warm and conversational. Now it was strained, careful. "I need to speak with you, in private." My heart rate spiked. The exam room suddenly felt suffocating. "Is something wrong with the baby?" I heard myself ask. The words came out higher pitched than I intended. My hand instinctively moved to my belly protective. "Is the baby okay?" "The baby looks fine," Emma said, and I registered the sincerity in her voice. That wasn't a lie, but it also wasn't a complete answer. "Please, come with me." She helped me up carefully, wordlessly. I followed her down the hallway in my half-buttoned examination gown. We passed other examination rooms, and I caught glimpses of other pregnant women, other ultrasounds, other moments that must have felt as routine and safe as mine had felt mere minutes ago. Emma led me to a small office at the end of the corridor. Once we were inside, she locked the door behind us. Actually locked it. My mind went into overdrive. Locked doors meant privacy. Privacy meant secrets. Secrets meant something was terribly, terribly wrong. "Please sit," Emma said, gesturing to the chair in front of a modest desk. Her hands were still trembling. I sat. My mouth had gone dry. Emma took a breath. I could see her collecting herself, steeling her nerves for whatever came next. She looked like she was about to tell me someone had died. 9 months ago, she began slowly. "A man called this clinic. He said he was your husband. He asked me to do something irregular." My stomach dropped. A man, my husband. "He asked me to replace his sperm sample with one from a donor. He said it was for medical reasons, that he didn't want you to know there was a genetic issue in his family. He said it would be better for you if you didn't have that burden." The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the chair. "Mrs. Thornton, your husband isn't the biological father of your baby." The words hung in the air between us. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. For several seconds, the only sound was the hum of the air conditioning unit and the distant murmur of voices from the hallway outside. I started, but I couldn't finish. What was there to say? "I need to show you something." Emma continued pulling out her drawer. She retrieved a folder, printed documents, emails, something that looked like a payment receipt. "I have proof. He paid me $50,000. He paid the embryologist $35,000. He paid the donor $25,000. $110,000. Why are you telling me this now?" The question came out as barely a whisper. "Why not before?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "He threatened me. After he paid me, he told me if I ever said a word, he'd make sure I lost my license, that I'd never work as a nurse again, that he'd destroy my career." She took a shaky breath. "I've been carrying this guilt for 9 months, Mrs. Thornton. 9 months of knowing what he did and not being able to say anything. But 3 weeks ago, I finally told my sister. She's a doctor. And she said I couldn't let this continue. She said you needed to know." She pulled out more documents. Payment records to James Mitchell, the embryologist. Receipts for Derek Sykes, the donor. Email confirmations. Every transaction documented. Every betrayal cataloged. "Your sister contacted my mother," I whispered. "Yes, Patricia. She said your mother needed to be prepared, that you deserved to know the truth from someone who cared about you." Patricia. Of course, Patricia knew. Somehow, I'd always known on some deep intuitive level that my mother had been trying to warn me, the way she'd watched Nathan from the beginning, the careful assessments in her eyes, the warnings I'd dismissed as maternal overprotectiveness. My phone was already in my hand before I realized I'd reached for it. I had to call her. I had to hear her voice. I had to know how long she'd been waiting for me to discover the truth. Patricia answered on the second ring. "Mom," I said, and my voice broke. Nathan, there's something." "I know." Patricia interrupted, her voice steady and calm. "I know, sweetheart. I've been waiting for you to call me. Emma's sister contacted me 3 weeks ago." Those words, more than anything else, made it real. She had been waiting. She had known. How long? How many months had my mother been carrying this knowledge while I'd been oblivious, happy, planning a future with a man who'd already betrayed me in ways I was only beginning to understand? "I need to know everything," I whispered into the phone. "Everything he's done." "Not over the phone," Patricia said firmly. "I'm coming to get you right now. Pack what you need. You're not going home tonight, Victoria. You're coming to me. We need to talk about what comes next." The line went quiet. I stood in Emma's small office, my hand on my belly, feeling my baby move inside me. 8 months of carrying a child I'd thought was Nathan's. 8 months of believing in a future that had never existed. 8 months of lies stacked upon lies. Emma reached across the desk and squeezed my hand gently. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I should have told you sooner." But I wasn't angry at Emma. I was angry at the man who'd forced her into complicity, angry at the choices he'd made, angry that I'd trusted him when every instinct had screamed that something was wrong. My phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. "I'm 15 minutes away. Wait for me in the lobby. Don't go home." I looked at Emma one last time. "Thank you for telling me the truth." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry it took so long." I gathered my things, left the examination room, and walked toward the lobby. Each step felt like moving through water. Behind me, the life I thought I had was dissolving. Ahead of me, a reckoning was beginning. And the truth, the terrible, undeniable truth, was only getting started. The conference room fell silent the moment I walked in. 12 heads turned toward me, not out of fear exactly, but out of that particular kind of respect that comes from knowing someone signs your paycheck and values your opinion more than her own comfort. I had that effect on people. "Let's cut to the chase," I said, sliding into the chair at the head of the table. "The Hartwell contract. Everyone's seen the preliminary designs." Nods around the room. "Good. I'd specifically requested that the team review the materials before this meeting. No surprises, no fumbling around while I sat here waiting for them to catch up. I didn't have time for that, and they knew it." Michael from the senior design team shifted in his seat. "The clients want something more. Contemporary. They're concerned the aesthetic we've proposed feels too traditional for their target demographic. I'd anticipated this. I always did. That was part of what made me good at what I do." "Show me their feedback," I said, and someone immediately pushed a folder across the table toward me. I flipped through it, quickly scanning their notes. 5 years of leading this firm had trained my eye to spot patterns in what clients really wanted versus what they said they wanted. These people wanted innovation, but they also wanted sophistication. They wanted to be bold without being reckless. "We redesigned the main atrium," I said, looking up from the folder. "Keep the marble that's non-negotiable. It's what they specifically requested, but we introduce modern geometric elements. Clean lines, unexpected color palette. We make it feel like the past and future are having a conversation in that space." I watched comprehension dawn on their faces. This was why they'd chosen to work for me, I suspected. Not because I was brilliant, though I was, but because I didn't make decisions from a place of ego or fear. I made them from a place of vision. "I want mock-ups by Friday," I continued. 3 concepts, full renderings. We present them to Hartwell on Monday, and we land this contract. No one questioned whether it was possible. They knew it was. They'd done it before. After the meeting ended and the team filed out, I remained at the table for a moment, collecting my thoughts before the next appointment. This was the rhythm of my day's meetings, bleeding into phone calls dissolving into site visits transforming into new contracts and fresh challenges. It was exhausting sometimes, but it was mine. Everything in this firm was mine. I'd built it from nothing. 8 years ago, I'd quit my job at a prestigious architectural firm after my boss, a man twice my age, who apparently believed that ambition in women was somehow threatening, had passed over me for a promotion I'd earned. He'd given the position to a man who'd been there half as long, who'd contributed half as much. I remembered sitting in my tiny apartment that night, stunned and angry, realizing that waiting for someone else to recognize my value was a waste of a life I only got to live once. So I'd left. I'd taken what little savings I had, maxed out a business line of credit that my bank had been reluctant to approve, and opened a small office in a converted warehouse space in Boston's design district. The first year was terrifying. There were months when I wasn't sure I could make payroll, months when I questioned whether my pride had made me reckless. But I'd been right about myself. The clients came. The reputation grew. The firm expanded. And now, 12 years later, I had a team of 35 talented people, contracts with some of Boston's most prestigious buildings, and a portfolio that had been featured in 3 major design magazines. I'd done that. No one had handed it to me. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through the calendar as I headed back to my office. Lunch meeting with a potential client at 1 o'clock. Conference call with the project manager in Philadelphia at 3. Email to review from the contractor who was overseeing the Copley Place renovation. The days stretched ahead of me, predictable and purposeful. This was the life I'd always wanted. Independence, recognition. The satisfaction of seeing something I'd envisioned become real, become tangible, become something that would outlast me. So why did it sometimes feel like something was missing? I set my phone on my desk and stared out the window. My office was on the 14th floor of a building in Back Bay, one of the few buildings that had been retrofitted with floor-to-ceiling windows that actually looked out on something worth seeing. From here, I could see brownstone's tree-lined streets, the kind of Boston architecture that spoke to heritage and permanence. On clear days, I could see all the way to the harbor. I was 32 years old. I was financially independent. I owned a penthouse apartment in one of the most desirable neighborhoods in the city. I had a career that fulfilled me intellectually and creatively. I had people who respected me, clients who trusted my judgment, a team that would follow my lead without question. I had everything I'd set out to get. So why, looking out at that perfect Boston skyline, did I feel the absence of something I couldn't quite name? It wasn't about marriage for the sake of being married. I wasn't the kind of woman who needed a man to complete her or validate her choices. I'd built my entire life on the principle that I was enough on my own. But somewhere in the last few years, between the business plans and the client presentations and the aggressive timeline to expand the firm, I'd started to notice that the apartment I'd worked so hard to afford felt quietly empty when I came home to it. I'd started to realize that success, for all its satisfactions, didn't warm you up on cold nights. I wanted that, not in some desperate, grasping way. Not in a way that would make me compromise who I was or settle for less than what I deserved. But I wanted to share this life with someone. I wanted someone who could understand the particular exhaustion of a day like this, the kind that comes not from being overwhelmed, but from being completely, totally in control and could sit with me without needing me to perform or achieve or prove anything. I wanted to love someone who loved me back, and I wanted to know what that felt like. But I wasn't going to lower my standards for it. I'd seen too many women do that. Brilliant women, accomplished women. Women who'd accomplished extraordinary things and then dimmed themselves to fit someone else's idea of what they should be. I'd made a promise to myself that I would never be one of them. So I waited. I went on the occasional date when friends set me up. I tried the apps for a while, realized I had too much self-respect for that particular brand of performance. I lived my life fully, completely independently. And I lived with the quiet certainty that somewhere out there had to be someone who could match this version of me. Someone who wouldn't need me to be smaller. I just hadn't found him yet. My calendar reminder chimed. Lunch meeting in 40 minutes. I gathered my things and headed out of the office, my team already preparing the materials I'd need. This was what I was good at. This I understood. Everything else, the wanting, the waiting, the hope that somewhere there was someone capable of understanding a woman like me that would have to wait. Or so I thought. My mother had a habit of timing her calls perfectly, always just when I was thinking about her, or when something in my life needed her particular brand of wisdom. But this time, she didn't call. She invited me to tea instead, which meant whatever she wanted to discuss was important enough to warrant face-to-face conversation. We met at a small cafe in Back Bay, a place we'd been going to for years. The kind of cafe that hadn't changed much, same worn wooden tables, same barista who always remembered how we took our coffee, same quiet corner by the window where we could talk without feeling rushed. My mother was already there when I arrived, a steaming cup of chamomile in front of her reading glasses perched on her nose. She smiled when she saw me, that warm smile that had gotten me through everything from childhood scraped knees to career-defining setbacks. "You're glowing," she said as I sat down across from her. "And there's something different about you lately." I ordered my usual cappuccino, no foam, and settled into the chair. There was no use denying it. I had been happy. Happier than I'd been in years, actually. For the first time since I'd built my company, I wasn't just content with my own company anymore. I wanted to share my life with someone. "I've been thinking about dating more seriously," I admitted. It felt safe to say it here with her. My mother had always been the person I could tell things to before life got complicated. I know I said I didn't need it, but I think I'm ready for something real. My mother set down her teacup carefully. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. There's nothing wrong with wanting that." She paused, and I watched her choose her next words with the kind of precision she'd learned from decades of being a CFO, someone who understood that word choice mattered. "But I want to tell you something, and I hope you'll really listen." There was something in her tone that made me sit up straighter. This wasn't casual conversation. This was her being a mother. "Be very careful," she said quietly, "with men who seem too perfect, the ones who are exactly what you thought you wanted, the ones who remember every detail about you, who always say the right thing, who have no messy parts showing." She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. "Those men aren't perfect, Victoria. No one is. And when men present themselves that way, it's usually because they're hiding something." I felt something shift in me. It wasn't anger exactly, not yet, but there was a defensiveness rising in my chest. What was she implying? That I was foolish? That I would fall for someone manipulative? "Mom," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm not some naive girl who doesn't know the difference between charming and genuine. I'm 30 years old. I've built an entire company. I think I can read people." My mother withdrew her hand, and I immediately regretted the sharpness in my tone, but I didn't apologize. Not yet. "I'm not saying you're foolish," she said carefully. "I'm saying that smart women fall for the wrong people all the time. Intelligence and romantic judgment aren't the same thing." She picked up her teacup again, a gesture that seemed almost defensive on her part. "I've lived a lot longer than you have. I've made mistakes. I've also watched other people make them. And the pattern I've seen—" She stopped, seeming to reconsider. "The pattern is always the same. The women who fall hardest are the ones who are most sure they won't fall at all." The cafe suddenly felt too warm. I sipped my cappuccino to buy myself some time to cool down the heat rising in my face. Why did I feel like she was attacking me? She wasn't. I knew she wasn't. But there was something about the vulnerability of admitting I wanted love, combined with her immediate caution, that felt like a rejection. "I appreciate the warning," I said, my voice taking on that professional tone I used in boardrooms, the one that created distance. "But I'm going to be fine. I'm not looking for a savior. I'm looking for a partner, and I know the difference." I watched something flicker across my mother's face. Disappointment, maybe, or resignation. She nodded slowly, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed. It was softer now, but also somehow sadder. "Okay," she said. I worry about you." "You don't need to," I replied, and I meant it with absolute certainty. I was self-sufficient. I was careful. I was nobody's fool. I know what I'm doing. But even as I said it, I could feel the distance opening up between us, a chasm created by my certainty and her doubt, by my refusal to listen and her decision to stop pushing. We tried to move past it to talk about her day and the renovation project I was working on, but the easy warmth that had been between us when I arrived had crystallized into something awkward. When we left the cafe, she hugged me goodbye, but it felt different, tentative, like she was holding back. And I, in my youthful confidence, interpreted that hesitation as her finally accepting that I was right, that I knew myself, that she didn't need to worry. I was wrong. For the next 2 years, our conversations became shorter, more stilted. Birthday texts instead of long phone calls, quick check-ins instead of deep talks. We still saw each other occasionally, but there was a formality to it now, a performance of family obligation rather than genuine connection. She stopped asking about my dating life. I stopped offering information. The warning she'd given me that day over tea became something unspoken between us, a thing neither of us acknowledged, but both of us remembered. And I moved forward with my life buoyed by my own certainty, completely blind to the fact that my mother had seen something I hadn't, that her instincts honed by decades of navigating human nature had picked up on something real, something dangerous. But I was too confident to listen, and I was about to find out why that mattered. The design conference was exactly the kind of event I thrived in. Hundreds of architects and interior designers packed into a downtown Boston hotel. Endless conversations about aesthetic vision and market trends, the particular kind of intellectual stimulation that came from talking shop with people who actually understood what you did. I was between presentations, standing near the bar in one of the conference hallways, grateful for a moment alone with my drink. That's when he appeared beside me. I noticed him first as a presence, tall, well-dressed, the kind of man who moved through the world with an ease that suggested he'd never been out of place anywhere. He ordered a drink with the casual confidence of someone used to getting what he asked for, and then he turned to me. "That keynote on sustainable commercial design was remarkable," he said. His voice had this warm, unhurried quality that made me feel like he had all the time in the world to talk to me. Though I thought they undersold the emotional component. A building isn't just about what it does, it's about how it makes you feel when you're inside it. I was struck immediately by the fact that he'd referenced the keynote without introducing himself, without the usual professional networking performance. He wasn't pitching. He wasn't trying to sell me something. He was just thinking out loud, and he'd decided I might be a person worth thinking with. "I'm Victoria," I said, extending my hand. "Nathan Blackwell." His handshake was firm but not aggressive. "Hedge fund manager, which is a much less interesting occupation than yours, I'm sure, but it pays the bills." He said it with such self-deprecation that it actually made me laugh. Here was a man introducing himself, and instead of puffing himself up the way men in finance usually did, at least in my experience, he was diminishing his own role. It was disarming. "What brought a hedge fund manager to a design conference?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Honestly, a client's recommendation." He said if I wanted to understand how to think bigger, I should listen to how designers think about space and possibility. I came expecting to be bored. I wasn't. He smiled, and the smile reached his eyes in a way that I'd unconsciously started cataloging as absent in most men I'd met. And now I've met someone who actually understands what they're talking about, so I'm genuinely glad I stayed. We talked for the next 45 minutes. Not the surface-level networking talk that dominated events like this, but real conversation. He asked me about my company, not in the way people usually did, fishing for impressive details to use in small talk, but with genuine curiosity. He asked what drew me to interior design, what the most satisfying part of my work was, what project I'd done that I was most proud of. And when I answered, he listened, like the answers actually mattered to him. He didn't talk much about himself. I registered that vaguely even then, but I interpreted it generously. He was modest. He was more interested in me than in self-promotion. It felt like the opposite of narcissism. It felt like consideration. By the time the conference reconvened for the afternoon session, he'd asked for my number. I'd given it to him. And I'd spent the rest of the day distracted, replaying the conversation, wondering if I'd imagined how easy it had been to talk to him. He texted that evening. Not the performative, "great meeting you" text that most men sent, but something specific. A photograph of the conference space we'd been standing in with a note that said, "Thinking about how this room would feel completely different if the light came from the west instead of the north. Wouldn't it look like you were standing inside a photograph of hope?" I stared at that text for a long time. He'd been thinking about what I'd said. He'd referenced something from our conversation, my mention of how light-shaped emotional response, and he'd built something thoughtful out of it. Most men couldn't remember to follow up. This one was sending me poetry about architecture. We started dating the following week, and then imperceptibly at first, then with increasing inevitability, I fell into a year with him that felt like the kind of year people write songs about. Not because anything dramatic happened, but because he was exactly what I'd been looking for without quite knowing how to articulate it. He was attentive without being clingy. He remembered details, not just big things, but small things. I mentioned once that my favorite coffee was from a specific cafe on Newbury Street, and 6 months later, he showed up at my office with a cup from that exact place still warm. No explanation necessary. He listened to me talk about work frustrations and didn't try to fix them. He just understood. He asked about my day and actually wanted to hear the answer. He didn't talk much about his own work. When I'd ask, he'd give vague answers about market performance and client portfolios. I thought he was being mysterious. I thought it was attractive, this man who was so genuinely interested in me that he didn't need to talk about himself. What I didn't understand was that he was avoiding scrutiny, that every question he deflected was a calculated move in a much larger game. But I didn't know that then. Then I just thought I'd finally found someone who saw me the way I'd always wanted to be seen. One autumn evening, about a year into dating him, Nathan suggested we get coffee. Not at a trendy cafe, but at a small, quiet place tucked away on a side street in Cambridge. Intimate, private, the kind of place where serious conversations happened. We sat at a corner table and I could feel my heartbeat accelerate. I knew on some intuitive level what was about to happen. He took my hand across the table. His eyes were serious, and there was something in his expression that looked like vulnerability, like he was about to risk something. "I can't imagine my life without you," he said quietly. "I don't want to. I want to build something with you, Victoria. Something real, something that lasts." He pulled out a ring, understated, elegant, perfect, and his voice dropped even lower. "Will you marry me?" I said yes before he'd even finished the question. In that moment, sitting across from a man who seemed to understand me more completely than anyone ever had, I felt like I'd finally gotten it right. I'd built a successful company. I'd learned to trust my own judgment. I'd waited for the right person instead of settling, and here he was. Here he was. My mother had warned me about men like Nathan, about men who seemed too perfect, who said all the right things, who presented themselves as having no messy edges. I dismissed her warning as paranoia born of her own experiences, her own fear that her brilliant daughter might be foolish enough to fall for a charming liar. I thought I was smarter than that. I thought I was too perceptive, too experienced, too self-aware to miss the signs of someone who was hiding something. But sitting there with an engagement ring catching the autumn light, I couldn't have been more wrong. The morning of my wedding arrived like something out of a dream, the kind of perfect that feels almost impossible when you're living through it. Late spring on Cape Cod meant soft sunlight and a breeze that carried the salt of the ocean, and the resort had transformed itself into something from a romantic fantasy. White flowers cascaded down every archway. The lawn where we'd be married overlooked the water, the Atlantic stretching out like a promise, beneath an impossibly blue sky. I remember standing in the bridal suite, still in my robe, looking at myself in the mirror and feeling like I was watching someone else's life happen. My own life. The one I'd built, the one I'd worked for, the one I'd learned to trust my judgment about all of it, had led to this moment. This man. This day. My makeup artist was just finishing when there was a soft knock on the door. One of the bridesmaids, my best friend from college, who'd driven 3 hours to be here, poked her head in. "He's here," she said, grinning. "He's waiting at the altar. He looks very emotional." I felt my stomach flutter. Nathan was emotional. Nathan, who usually moved through the world with such composed certainty, was waiting for me with visible emotion. It seemed like a good sign. It seemed like proof that this was real, that he loved me, that he understood what this day meant. I'd been wrong about so many things when it came to men. I'd been suspicious of the wrong people, trusting of the wrong intentions. But with Nathan, I'd gotten it right. He was exactly who he claimed to be. I was so incredibly wrong about that. The dress was a work of art, simple, elegant, the kind of dress that whispered rather than shouted. My mother had helped me choose it before our relationship had settled into its comfortable distance. She'd actually smiled when she saw me in it, the kind of smile that broke through all our recent awkwardness. "You're beautiful," she'd said simply, "and I hope he deserves you." At the time, I'd interpreted that as her finally accepting my choice, finally understanding that I knew what I was doing. Now looking back, I realized she'd been asking a question, not making a statement, but I didn't have time for those thoughts. Not today. Today was about the certainty I'd felt in that coffee shop when he'd asked me to marry him. Today was about believing that I'd finally found someone who could match me, who could understand me, who could be my partner in building something real. I walked down the aisle in a haze of joy and anticipation. The sun was warm on my skin. Guests turned in their seats smiling. The string quartet played something classical and beautiful. And at the end of the aisle, under a flower-draped arch, stood Nathan. He was wearing a tailored tuxedo, and he looked exactly like the man I'd fallen in love with. Handsome, composed with that particular quality of certainty that I'd learned to trust. Except for his eyes. His eyes were wet. There were tears running down his face as I approached, and my heart clenched. This was it. This was the proof I'd been waiting for, that he loved me, that this moment mattered to him, that all of this was real. What I didn't understand was that those tears weren't from love. They were from relief. They were the tears of a man watching his carefully constructed plan finally come together. They were the tears of someone who'd spent the last year and a half studying every detail of my life, learning exactly how to position himself as indispensable, and who was now watching me walk toward a legal commitment that would make everything so much easier. But I couldn't see that. I saw only a man who was crying because he loved me. "You're beautiful," he whispered when I reached him, taking my hands. His hands were steady, always steady. "I can't believe you're going to be my wife." The ceremony was everything a wedding should be. Our vows were heartfelt, mine anyway were genuine. I stood there in front of everyone I cared about and promised to love this man, to be his partner, to build a life with him. I meant every word. Nathan's vows were equally beautiful. He talked about finding me, about knowing immediately that he'd found the person he wanted to spend his life with. He talked about partnership and building something together. He talked about loving me for all the days of my life. And when he said it, he was still crying. I cried too. Happy tears. Tears that came from a place of genuine belief that I'd finally gotten something right, that I'd waited long enough, been patient enough, been careful enough, and now I was getting my reward. The kiss at the end of the ceremony felt like a beginning. Like everything before, all the years of working alone, all the nights coming home to an empty apartment, all the wondering if I'd ever find someone who could understand me had been worth it to get to this moment. The reception was a blur of joy. We danced. We ate dinner under white lights strung through the trees. My mother found me during the reception and hugged me longer than she usually did, and I registered that as acceptance, as her finally believing that I'd made the right choice. Nathan's hand never left the small of my back. He was attentive, always touching me gently, always present. Guests commented on how well matched we seemed, how obvious it was that he adored me. I felt like I was living in the best version of my life, the one where the ambitious woman finally got both the career and the love she'd worked so hard for. As the evening wound down and we prepared to leave for our honeymoon, Nathan pulled me aside onto a quiet garden terrace overlooking the ocean. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the moment felt almost too perfect to be real. "Thank you," he said, pulling me close, "for saying yes. For trusting me, for letting me be part of your life." I remember thinking how thoughtful that was, how considerate, how much it proved that he actually saw me, understood the magnitude of what I was offering by letting someone into my carefully constructed world. What I didn't understand was that he was thanking me for the access, for the trust that would make everything he'd planned so much easier to execute. That night, lying in a hotel suite in Cape Cod, newly married and happier than I'd been in years, I believed I'd finally figured out how to do love right. I believed that my life was beginning. The account balance didn't make sense. I sat at my kitchen counter, coffee growing cold in my hands, and refreshed the page 3 times. $145,000 gone. Not a typo. Not a pending transaction waiting to post. Just gone. 3 months of marriage, and I'd never thought to question anything Nathan did. That was my first mistake. I called him at the office, my voice steady, even though my hands weren't. "Nathan, I'm looking at our account. Where's the money?" There was a pause just long enough for my stomach to tighten. "Victoria the First." He took a breath. "I should have told you earlier. I'm sorry. It was my father's debt. He's had some financial trouble, and I couldn't let him down. I didn't know how to tell you. I was so ashamed." The words came so smoothly wrapped in guilt and regret. I wanted to believe him. Part of me did believe him. But another part, a smaller, quieter part, whispered something different. "Why didn't you ask me first?" I heard myself say. "You're right. You're absolutely right. I should have asked. I made a mistake, Victoria. A big one. And I'm sorry. I promise it will never happen again." That night, he came home with flowers. He held me and apologized again, his voice thick with remorse. I told him it was okay, that of course his family mattered, that I understood. But I didn't. Not really. Something felt off, like a door closing quietly in the distance. Then came the silence. For 3 days, Nathan barely spoke to me beyond pleasantries. He'd respond to my questions with short answers. He'd smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. When I tried to touch him, he'd turn away gently, as though my apology for doubting him hadn't been enough, as though I'd hurt him too deeply. By the second day of silence, I was texting him apologies. "I'm sorry for how I reacted. You were just trying to help your family." He'd respond hours later with a thumbs-up emoji. Nothing more. By the third day, I was convinced that I'd been wrong to question him at all. I was the problem. I was the one who didn't trust, who jumped to conclusions, who had made my husband feel ashamed for trying to be a good son. The guilt settled into my chest like a stone. When he finally spoke to me fully again on the 4th morning, I was so relieved that I almost cried. He took me into his arms and said, "I know you were scared, but we're a team now. We have to trust each other." I buried my face in his chest and nodded. Yes, we were a team, and I was the weak link for having doubted him. That same week, my mother called. "How are you, sweetheart?" Her voice had that careful quality it always did when she was about to say something she thought I wouldn't want to hear. "I'm good, Mom. Everything's good." "Victoria." She paused. "Has Nathan mentioned anything about money? Any requests or concerns?" My chest tightened. "Why are you asking?" "Because I ran into someone who knows his family. Apparently, Nathan's father passed away years ago and there's no debt. Victoria, that's a serious red flag." The words hit me like cold water. For a moment, everything tilted. Then I pushed back against it hard. "Mom, you're being paranoid. You don't even know him. Nathan explained everything to me and I believe him." My voice came out sharper than I intended. "I don't appreciate you trying to make me doubt my husband." "I'm not trying to. I have to go," I said, and I hung up. I didn't call her back for 2 weeks. She tried calling me, but I let it go to voicemail. I told Nathan what she'd said, and he looked hurt, genuinely hurt, or so I thought, and said, "Your mother never wanted you to be happy with anyone. It's easier for her to keep you to herself." I believed him. Of course I did. Looking back now, I can see exactly how the trap was closing. Each lie led to another choice, and each choice pulled me further away from the people who might have saved me. Nathan knew what he was doing. He knew that guilt was a more powerful motivator than love, that silence was more controlling than anger, that my own doubt would become my worst enemy. I chose to believe him over myself. And in doing so, I chose to walk further into the dark. What I didn't know then was how much darker it would get. 2 years into my marriage, I still remembered that feeling of doubt from the account incident. But I'd learned to push it aside. Nathan had been nothing but attentive since then, flowers on random Tuesdays, his hand on the small of my back, when we walked the way he'd whisper that he loved me before I fell asleep. I'd convinced myself that I'd overreacted. People made mistakes. People had family emergencies. I needed to stop questioning everything. By then I was 29 and something had shifted inside me. It wasn't dramatic. It crept up slowly like a tide that you don't notice until you're suddenly standing in deeper water. I started noticing babies everywhere. At the grocery store, a mother would rock a fussy infant in her cart, and I'd find myself studying the scene, how her hand curved protectively around the baby's back, the way the child's small fingers gripped her shirt. I'd watch for longer than was normal, probably creepy to outside observers. At restaurants, I'd watch couples with toddlers and imagine what that looked like from the other side. One of my colleagues at the design firm announced she was pregnant, and instead of feeling happy for her, I felt the sharp pinch of wanting something I didn't have. That night I went home and stared at my reflection, wondering if there was something wrong with me for not being able to give Nathan what so many other women seem to manage so easily. Nathan noticed the shift too. He'd catch me scrolling through nursery designs on my phone, soft sage walls, wooden cribs, mobiles with constellation shapes. He never said anything judgmental. He'd just smile and sit beside me on the couch. One evening in late winter, I was lost in photos of a perfect neutral-tone nursery when he pulled me close. "What are you looking at?" he asked, though I suspected he already knew. I turned to him with a nervous flutter in my chest, suddenly feeling vulnerable in a way I hadn't anticipated. "Nathan, I want us to have a child." I expected hesitation. I expected the conversation I'd heard other husbands have, the, "Let's wait a little longer," or "We should talk about this more," or "Are you sure you're ready?" But Nathan didn't do that. He pulled me closer, and without even a pause, without even a moment of reflection, he said exactly what I wanted to hear. "Of course I want that too, Victoria. Of course. You'd be an amazing mother." The ease of his response should have made me feel better, should have filled me with joy and certainty. Instead, there was that tiny voice again, the one I'd been training myself to ignore for the past 2 years. Too smooth, too ready, like he'd been waiting for you to ask. But I silenced it immediately. He was being supportive. That's what partners do. That's what husbands do when they love you. We started trying that spring. For the first 2 months, I was optimistic in that naive, hopeful way where you convince yourself that this time will be different, that you're the one whose pregnancy test will have 2 pink lines on the first try. I'd wake up certain I felt something, a twinge, a tenderness, a shift in my body that surely meant something. By month 4, I'd started tracking my ovulation with an app that sent me notifications about my fertile window. By month 6, the tracking had become obsessive. I had spreadsheets. I had notes. I had a notebook where I documented everything: my temperature, my cervical mucus, my mood, the dates we'd had intercourse. By month 8, it had become torture. Every month was the same cycle, a ritual of hope and disappointment that I couldn't escape. Hope calculation, precise timing, waiting. Then the familiar cramps that signaled failure. The private bathroom trips where I'd confirm what I already knew. The shower where I'd sit on the floor and let myself cry for exactly 5 minutes before pulling myself together. Nathan would find me afterward, my hair still damp, my eyes red, and he'd hold me without speaking. He'd just be there, his presence somehow both comforting and hollow. I'd bury my face in his chest while he stroked my hair, and I'd wonder if he felt as broken as I did. After a year of nothing, I knew something was wrong. It wasn't normal. It wasn't just bad luck or bad timing. Something in our biology, in our bodies, in our ability to create life together was broken. The fertility specialist's office smelled like hope and lavender and something chemical underneath. The waiting room was full of women like me, women who wanted something that should come naturally but hadn't. Women carrying the invisible weight of failure. The doctor was a woman in her 60s with gray streaking through her dark hair and kind eyes that had probably delivered bad news 1,000 times before. She reviewed our medical histories carefully, asked us both detailed questions about our backgrounds, our health, our lifestyle. Then she recommended baseline testing. 2 weeks later, Nathan and I sat in her office while she delivered the diagnosis. She spoke in the careful, measured tone of someone who knew this information would change something fundamental. "Mr. Blackwell, your semen analysis shows a low sperm count and poor motility. The sperm aren't moving efficiently through the reproductive tract. This is treatable, and it does explain why Victoria hasn't conceived naturally. Your count is significantly below normal parameters." I watched Nathan's face crumble. His jaw tightened. His eyes went glassy. I reached over and took his hand, squeezing it. When the doctor finished explaining the options, IVF with ICSI, which would help compensate for the motility issues, Nathan stood up abruptly and excused himself. I found him in the parking lot, sitting in the driver's seat with the door open, tears streaming down his face. His shoulders shook with what looked like genuine sobs. I'd never seen him cry like that before. Not at movies or sad news or anything. Real gut-wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him. "Hey," I whispered, touching his arm. "Hey, it's gonna be okay." "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I'm so sorry, Victoria. I wanted to give you this. I wanted to give you a baby, and I can't even—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "Stop," I said, and I pulled him toward me. "We can do IVF. The doctor said ICSI has excellent outcomes. We're not done. We're just taking a different path. A lot of couples do this. He held me so tightly I could barely breathe, and I thought his tears were for the baby we couldn't have naturally. I thought they were for me, for my disappointment, my heartbreak, my year of crying in showers. I thought they were the tears of a man devastated by his own biological limitations, his inability to give his wife what she desperately wanted. I didn't understand then that he was crying because his plan had almost fallen apart, because the diagnosis had thrown a wrench into whatever calculation he'd been making in his head all along. Over the next week, Nathan did what he said he always did. He researched everything obsessively. He spent hours on his laptop making detailed lists, reading peer-reviewed studies comparing clinics across the region. I'd catch him with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low tones about protocols and success rates and embryologist credentials. He seemed so earnest in his investigation, so determined to find us the best possible path forward. It was one of the things I loved about him, his attention to detail, his refusal to settle for mediocrity. "I've been looking at fertility centers," he finally told me over dinner one night, his voice calm and authoritative. "Reproductive Science Center of Boston has the highest success rates in the region. Their embryologists are top-tier Dr. Claire Brennan, trained at Johns Hopkins. Their ICSI outcomes are exceptional. I know it's a bit of a drive, but I think it's worth it. We need the best, Victoria. We need the best for our baby." I didn't hesitate. I trusted his research completely. I trusted that he'd done his homework and was looking out for us. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband. He'd been supportive through the disappointment and the diagnosis. He wanted this as much as I did. So I made the appointment at Reproductive Science Center of Boston for the following month. What I didn't know was that Nathan hadn't just researched the clinic. He'd already been there. He'd already met with specific people. He'd already made arrangements that had nothing to do with high success rates or embryologist credentials. He'd laid the groundwork for something far more sinister than I could have imagined, a plan so calculated and cruel that it would take months before I even began to understand the depths of his deception. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that we were finally moving forward toward our dream. November arrived with the promise of a new beginning. I stood in the waiting room of Reproductive Science Center of Boston with a folder of medical records and a heart full of cautious hope. The clinic was sterile and modern, all white walls and soft lighting designed to make you feel like you were somewhere hopeful rather than somewhere that dealt in the business of biological failure. Nathan held my hand as we checked in, and I squeezed it, grateful for his presence. The first cycle was a blur of appointments and injections. Every morning I'd wake up and give myself shots in the belly, tiny needles filled with hormones that were supposed to make my ovaries produce multiple eggs instead of one. I'd go to work, pretend everything was normal, then rush home to temperature checks and ultrasounds. Nathan would watch as the technician scanned my ovaries, seeing the follicles growing, counting them like they were lottery tickets. 23 follicles, the technician said during one appointment in mid-November. That's a good number. I felt vindicated somehow, like my body was finally cooperating. Like maybe this would work. Like maybe I wouldn't be one of the unlucky ones. Maybe this time biology would be on my side. The retrieval happened in early December. They put me under anesthesia, and when I woke up, it was done. 15 eggs retrieved. 15 chances. Nathan brought me flowers and sat beside me in recovery, but there was something distant about him, like he was physically present but mentally elsewhere. I attributed it to his own stress, his worry about whether this would work. 15 is good, I whispered to him. That's really good. He nodded and squeezed my hand, but his eyes were looking past me. 3 days later, we got the fertilization report. Of the 15 eggs, 12 had fertilized with ICSI, 12 embryos. I cried happy tears reading the email on my phone. 12 chances to become a mother. 12 little possibilities developing in a lab somewhere. But then came the waiting, the watching, the hope that slowly turned to dread as we waited for the transfer. The transfer happened on a cold December day. They put back 2 embryos, the best-looking ones, the embryologist said. We went home and waited. For 2 weeks, I didn't do anything strenuous. I was gentle with my body, careful as if my caution could somehow protect the microscopic life that might be settling into my uterus. On day 14, I took the test. Negative. I stared at it for 5 minutes, waiting for a second line to appear. Sometimes they showed up late, didn't they? Sometimes the test needed more time. I waited. Nothing changed. The test was negative. Both embryos had failed to implant. I called Nathan at work. "They didn't take," I said, and my voice cracked on the words. There was a pause. "I'm sorry, Victoria." That was all he said. Not, "We'll try again." Not, "This doesn't mean anything," just, "I'm sorry." And something in that brevity broke me open. I didn't go back to the office. I went home and got into bed. I didn't shower, I didn't change clothes, I didn't eat anything more than a few crackers. For 3 days, I lay in bed and let myself fall apart completely. I cried until I had no more tears, then cried some more. I stared at the ceiling and counted the tiles. I thought about my body, about how it had betrayed me, about how I was 30 years old and couldn't do the one thing that women's bodies were supposedly designed to do. Nathan came home from work and brought me glasses of water. He'd set them on the nightstand, and I'd ignore them until the condensation dripped onto the wood. He'd sit on the edge of the bed sometimes, just sitting there silently, but he never held me. He never told me it would be okay. He'd just sit for a few minutes and then leave again, as if my grief was something he needed to ration his exposure to. On the 4th day, I forced myself out of bed. I showered. I changed clothes. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. "We can try again," Nathan said that night, his voice measured and calm. "The embryologist said there are still 10 more embryos frozen. We can transfer again next cycle." I nodded, too exhausted to feel anything but a hollow determination. By late January of 2023, we started the second cycle. It was supposed to be simpler, no stimulation this time, just a frozen transfer. I took oral medications to prepare my uterus, went to monitoring appointments, and waited for the lining to thicken properly. Nathan continued to be supportive in that strange, distant way of his. He'd ask about appointments. He'd remind me to take my medications. But there was something mechanical about his care, like he was going through motions rather than feeling anything. What I didn't know was that Nathan was doing far more than offering support. Unknown to me, he'd been communicating with someone at the clinic. Unknown to me, arrangements had been finalized. Unknown to me, when my eggs were fertilized with what I believed was his sperm, they weren't actually his sperm at all. The swap had happened in the background, silent and calculated, while I focused on my lining thickness and hormone levels. The transfer happened on a cold February morning. One embryo went back in the best of the frozen ones, they said. I felt it go in this microscopic bundle of cells that represented years of longing and heartbreak and hope. I went home and waited, trying not to let my hopes get too high this time. I'd learned that lesson. On day 12 of the transfer, I took the test with trembling hands. 2 pink lines. I stared at it for a full minute before the reality sank in. Positive. I was pregnant. After a year of trying naturally a failed IVF cycle, months of appointments and hope and heartbreak, I was finally actually pregnant. My hands shook as I called Nathan at work. My voice wavered as I told him. "We did it," I whispered. "Nathan, we did it." For the first time in months, he sounded genuinely excited. "Oh my God, Victoria, oh my God, that's amazing. I love you so much. This is the best news." I felt something release in my chest. All of it, the pain, the waiting, the doubt, the failure, it had all been worth it. We were going to have a baby. We were going to be a family. The first ultrasound was scheduled for a week later. I lay on the table with the cold gel on my belly, and the technician moved the probe across my skin. There, it was a tiny sac, a flutter of a heartbeat. I started crying immediately, these tears of pure joy and relief. Nathan stood beside me watching the screen, and I grabbed his hand. "Our baby," I said to him. He smiled and squeezed my hand, but his eyes held something I couldn't quite read. The months that followed were a blur of happiness. I told my mother, and she cried with me on the phone. I told my colleagues at work, and they threw me a small shower. I bought maternity clothes and started decorating the nursery with soft yellows and gentle animals painted on the walls. I'd wake up in the morning and place my hand on my belly, marveling at the life growing inside me. I'd talk to the baby sometimes, telling it about the world it was going to enter, about the family that was waiting for it, about how wanted it was. By September, I was 8 months pregnant. My due date was in November. I was round and glowing and completely, utterly happy. I'd post ultrasound photos on social media. My belly had stretch marks now, and I'd trace them with my fingers, marveling at how my body was changing. I'd lie in bed at night and feel the baby kicking, moving alive inside me. I'd count the kicks and marvel at how real it all felt. Nathan would rest his hand on my belly sometimes and feel the kicks too. He'd smile at me with what looked like genuine affection and pride. And I believed it. I believed that he was as excited as I was. I believed that we were building something beautiful together. I believed that this baby was our baby, the product of our love and our perseverance through hardship. What I didn't know was that everything I believed was a carefully constructed lie. What I didn't know was that the man sleeping beside me had orchestrated this entire journey with calculated precision. What I didn't know was that the baby I was carrying, the baby I talked to the baby, whose kicks I felt every night, the baby I loved already with a ferocity that terrified me, wasn't his. I was 8 months pregnant and completely unaware that my world was about to shatter. I was 8 months pregnant, and in just 1 month, everything would change. The first sign that something was wrong came in June, 4 months into my pregnancy. It wasn't dramatic. It was small. It was the way Nathan stopped looking at me when I walked into a room. It started with his phone. He'd always had it with him, most people do, but suddenly it was different. He held it like it was a secret. He'd silence it when I came near or flip it face down on the table so quickly that I'd wonder if I'd imagined it. He'd excuse himself to take calls in the hallway or outside, whispering so quietly I couldn't hear anything but the murmur of his voice. One night, a call came through at midnight. Without thinking, I reached for my phone to check the time, but Nathan was already out of bed, padding into the living room to answer it. I lay there in the dark, listening to the low rumble of his voice through the closed door. 15 minutes. 20. I dozed off and woke to find him sliding back into bed, the phone still warm in his hand. "Who was that?" I asked. "Just work," he said. "Go back to sleep." But it didn't feel like work. Work calls didn't come at midnight. By mid-June, he started asking for money. We were sitting at the kitchen table, and he brought it up casually like it was nothing. "Victoria, I've been looking at some investment opportunities. There's a new fund that's going to perform incredibly well. I need you to invest $200,000. I can double it in 6 months, maybe more." I set down my coffee. $200,000? Yes, it's a limited opportunity. We need to move fast. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Nathan, we just spent a lot on the nursery. The baby's coming in a few months. Why do we suddenly need this investment?" He leaned back in his chair and looked at me with something that felt like disappointment. "Because it's good for us. For our future. For our baby's future." "I'm not questioning the investment," I said carefully. "I'm asking why you need such a large amount all at once." "Because that's how it works, Victoria. You either commit fully or you don't commit at all." He paused and his voice softened. "Don't you trust me?" There it was. The question designed to make me feel guilty for asking a reasonable question. "Of course I trust you," I heard myself say. "I just wanted to understand." "I know what I'm doing," he said. "I've researched this extensively. I wouldn't ask if I didn't think it was the right move." I nodded and let it drop. I was too tired to argue, too pregnant, too vulnerable. I authorized the transfer 2 days later. By late June, I found the text message. Nathan had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he showered. It wasn't locked. As I walked past to get my water bottle, the screen lit up with a notification, a text from someone named Jessica. "Can't wait to see you tonight." The emoji hit me like a punch to the stomach. My hands started shaking. I picked up the phone. I know I shouldn't have, but I did, and scrolled through their conversation. Casual messages about meeting up, about missing each other, about wanting to see him without me knowing. I took a screenshot with my own phone. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. Before I could think better of it, I called the number. A woman answered. Her voice was cautious. "Hello." "Who is this?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. There was a pause. Who's asking? This is Victoria, Nathan's wife. Another pause, longer this time. Then she hung up. I stood there in my kitchen, 4 months pregnant, holding 2 phones, trying to understand what had just happened. Jessica knew who I was. She knew exactly who I was, and she hung up anyway. Nathan came out of the shower 15 minutes later, wrapped in a towel, steam rising off his skin. I didn't give him time to settle. Who is Jessica Hartwell? His entire body went still. For just a fraction of a second, I saw something cross his face. Panic, maybe, or anger. Then it smoothed into confusion. What? Jessica, from your phone, the woman texting you about seeing you tonight. Nathan walked past me into the bedroom. Victoria, you're being paranoid. I'm not paranoid. I read the texts. You read my private messages. Now his voice had an edge to it. That's not okay. You violated my privacy. Don't turn this around on me. Who is she? He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at me with something that looked like pity. She's a work colleague, nothing more. But I'm not going to stand here and be interrogated like I've done something wrong. You have done something wrong. She sent you a heart emoji, Nathan. That's not how you text a colleague. You're reading too much into it. You're stressed. You're pregnant. Your hormones are all over the place right now, and you're seeing things that aren't there. He said it so reasonably, so calmly, like he was explaining something obvious to a child. This is pregnancy paranoia, Victoria. It's real. It happens to a lot of women. I'm pregnant, not stupid, I said, my voice shaking. I know what I saw. He stood up and walked into the closet without responding. When he came out, he was dressed, and he was done talking about it. For 3 days, Nathan barely spoke to me. He'd answer direct questions with single words. He slept on the couch. When I tried to touch him, he'd move away. I texted him, I'm sorry for going through your phone. I'm sorry for accusing you. I know you wouldn't do that. He responded with a thumbs up emoji. Nothing else. By day 3, I was convinced I was insane. Maybe he was right. Maybe it was pregnancy hormones. Maybe I was reading too much into a friendly text. Maybe I was being paranoid and ridiculous and pushing away the man I loved based on my own irrational fears. I called Olivia. Hey, what's wrong? She answered immediately, like she could hear the distress in my silence. I think Nathan is having an affair. Olivia didn't hesitate. Okay, tell me everything. I told her about the phone, the text Jessica the Midnight calls the money request, his denial, the pregnancy hormone accusation. I told her how small and crazy I felt saying it all out loud. When I finished, Olivia was quiet for a moment. Victoria, that's not paranoia. That's intuition. Your gut is trying to tell you something. But he said, listen to me. I've known Nathan for 2 years. I've watched how he treats you, and I'm telling you, your instincts are right. A man doesn't ask for $200,000 and have another woman texting him at midnight unless something is very, very wrong. Or I cried, then these heavy, pregnant lady tears that came from somewhere deep and desperate. What do? I asked her. I don't know, Olivia said honestly, but I know that you're not crazy. You're not paranoid. You're a woman carrying a baby and something in your gut is telling you that your husband is lying to you. And I believe you. After we hung up, I sat in my living room with my hands on my swollen belly, feeling the baby kick against my palms. I was 4 months away from meeting this child. I was carrying a baby that I believed was ours, mine and Nathan's, a product of our love and our perseverance. But suddenly, I wasn't sure what was real anymore. I wasn't sure if I could trust Nathan. I wasn't sure if I could trust myself. I wasn't sure if the man I'd married was the man I thought he was, or if he'd been someone else all along. Someone calculated and cruel and capable of infidelities and lies. I was alone in my own marriage, suspended in this terrible space between certainty and doubt. And I had no idea that the real truth, the truth that would shatter me far more completely than any affair ever could, was waiting for me in just 1 more month. I arrived at Reproductive Science Center of Boston on a Tuesday morning in early September. 8 months pregnant, swollen and tired, I was ready for a routine ultrasound. I'd been coming here for months now, and the staff knew me. The routine was comfortable. The routine was safe. Except Emma was there instead of Dr. Brennan. "Hi, Victoria," she said as I checked in, and something in her voice made me pause. She sounded different, nervous. She didn't quite meet my eyes as she led me back to the ultrasound room. "Where's Dr. Brennan?" I asked. "She had an emergency," Emma said quickly. "But I'll be doing your ultrasound today. I'm fully certified and doctor. Brennan will review everything with you afterward if you want." I nodded and settled onto the exam table. Emma pulled up my file on the computer and I watched her face as she scanned through my records. Her hands stilled. Her jaw tightened. I saw the exact moment she found what she was looking for, the moment she saw my husband's name. Her entire body went rigid. "Emma," I said, "is everything okay?" She didn't answer immediately. She just stared at the screen, her hands trembling slightly as they rested on the keyboard. Then she looked up at me, and her eyes held something I'd never seen before. Fear, guilt, recognition. "I need to show you something," she said quietly. "But not here. Can you get dressed?" My stomach tightened. "What's wrong? Is the baby okay?" "The baby is fine," she said, and I heard the truth in her voice. "But we need to talk privately." Emma led me to a small office off the hallway and locked the door behind us. My heart was pounding. I'd had 3 pregnancy scares, and my body recognized the pattern of bad news. But Emma's face suggested this wasn't about my health. She sat down across from me and took a breath. "About 11 months ago," she began, "a man called this clinic. He said he was your husband." My mouth went dry. "He asked for me specifically," Emma continued. "He said he'd heard good things about me, that I was discreet. He wanted to know if we could do a sperm sample swap during an IVF cycle." "A what?" "He wanted to replace his sample with a donor sample. He said it was for health reasons. He said it was urgent." Emma's voice was steady now, like she'd rehearsed this speech 1,000 times. "The actual procedure happened about 9 months ago during your second cycle, and he offered me $50,000 to make it happen." I stared at her. The words didn't compute. "He offered you $50,000 to swap his sperm?" "Yes." Emma pulled out a folder. Inside were documents, receipts, emails, payment confirmations. Most of the identifying information was redacted, but the numbers were clear. $50,000 transferred to an account with Emma's initials. "I was terrified," Emma said quietly. "I'd never done anything like this before. But he was so confident, so certain that this was what he needed. He said it was confidential. He said it was between us." "Why didn't you tell me?" My voice sounded strange in my own ears. "Why didn't you refuse?" "Because he threatened me," Emma said, and her voice cracked. "He said if I told anyone, if I told you, if I told my supervisor, if I told the police, he would destroy my career. He said he had connections. He said he could make sure I never worked in this field again. He made it very, very clear that he was serious." Tears were rolling down Emma's face now. "There was an embryologist involved, too," she continued. "James Mitchell. He swapped the samples. Your husband paid him $35,000. And there was a donor, Derek Sykes. Your husband paid him $25,000 for his sample." I tried to do the math. "That's over $100,000. "Yes," Emma said. "And I've been carrying this for 9 months. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every time you came in for an appointment, I had to look you in the face and pretend everything was normal, and I was dying inside." "Why are you telling me now?" I asked. "Because I couldn't do it anymore." Emma wiped her eyes. 3 weeks ago, I told my sister. Her name is Dr. Claire Brennan. She's a doctor here, too, and she told me that I had to tell you, that you deserve to know. My mother's best friend was named Claire. No, that was different. Claire Brennan. I'd heard that name before. "Wait, Dr. Claire Brennan, I think I've met her." "Yes," Emma said. "She's my sister, and she made me promise to tell you the truth. She said you needed to know before the baby came." "Did she—" I trailed off. "Did she tell anyone else?" Emma nodded slowly. "She contacted your mother." The room tilted. "My mother—" 3 weeks ago, Claire called your mother and told her everything. Your mother has been helping us. She wanted you to know the truth." I couldn't breathe properly. My mother. My mother had known for 3 weeks and hadn't told me. My mother, who I'd pushed away because I thought she was paranoid. My mother, who I'd chosen not to trust. My mother had been right all along, and she'd been working behind the scenes to get me this information. Victoria, Emma said gently, I need you to understand something. What your husband did, this wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake. He planned this. He orchestrated it. I don't understand, I whispered. He wanted a baby. We both wanted a baby. Why would he? I don't know his reasons, Emma said. But I know that he paid over $100,000 to make sure that the baby you're carrying wouldn't be his. The words landed like stones in still water. The baby I'm carrying. The baby I've been talking to, dreaming about planning for. The baby who kicks at night and hiccups in my belly. What do you mean, not his? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. I mean, Emma said quietly, that the embryo that was transferred into you was created with your egg and Derek Sykes' sperm, not your husband's. Your husband paid to make sure it would be that way. I put my hand on my belly and felt the baby move beneath my palm. The baby is Derek Sykes' biological child, Emma continued. Your husband knew this would happen. He chose it. But why? I heard myself ask. Why would he do that? I think, Emma said carefully, that he was planning to do something with this information, something to hurt you. But I don't know what. I sat in that office for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. My hands were shaking. My entire body was shaking. Everything I thought I knew had just been turned inside out. I was carrying a baby, a healthy baby according to every ultrasound and test. But the baby wasn't my husband's. My husband had orchestrated it. My husband had paid over $100,000 to ensure that the child growing inside me would not be his biological child. And my mother had known. My mother, whom I'd dismissed and pushed away, had known and had been trying to protect me. Everything was a lie. Everything. The baby, the marriage, the love story I thought I was living. It was all a carefully constructed deception designed and executed by the man sleeping beside me every night. I was 8 months pregnant and completely, utterly shattered. Before I left Emma's office, she grabbed my arm. There's something else, she said quietly. Something you need to know. I turned back to face her. I wasn't sure I could handle another revelation, but her expression told me I didn't have a choice. Your husband sent an email to a DNA testing company, Emma said. He was asking about paternity testing. Specifically, he wanted to know how to make the results public, how to use them as evidence. Evidence of what? Evidence that the baby isn't his. He was planning to do the test after the baby was born, and then he was going to claim you committed adultery. He was going to use your prenup against you. The room spun. He wasn't just covering up infidelity. He wasn't just replacing his sperm with a donor's. He was setting up an elaborate frame. He was planning to destroy me using the very document we'd signed to protect each other. I walked out of that clinic with my hands shaking. I called my mother before I even got to my car. Mom, I said, my voice breaking, I need you. I know, sweetheart, she said, and her voice was steady in a way mine wasn't. I know everything. Dr. Brennan told me. I've been gathering information. We need to act fast. How do I couldn't even finish the sentence. Come home, Patricia said. Come to the house. We're going to handle this. For the first time in years, I didn't question my mother's judgment. I drove to the house I'd grown up in, the house Patricia had maintained while raising me, the house that had always felt like safety. My mother was waiting at the door. She pulled me into her arms and I let myself fall apart against her chest. She held me while I cried for the baby, for the marriage, for the years I'd wasted doubting myself instead of trusting her. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. Hush, Patricia said. We're past that now. We have work to do. She led me into the living room where a man in his 50s was sitting in an armchair. He stood when I entered, and Patricia made the introductions. Victoria, this is Marcus Sullivan. He's a private investigator. He was a Boston detective for 20 years. I've hired him to look into your husband's background. Marcus extended his hand and I shook it. His grip was firm and reassuring. "I'm going to find everything," he said simply. "Every lie, every transaction, every secret, and you have my word. I want to know everything." I told him. "Everything he's hidden." "Then give me 2 weeks," Marcus said. He gave me 2 weeks and 3 days. When he returned in mid-October, he came with files, thick files. He spread them across Patricia's dining room table, and I sat down to look at a life I didn't recognize, a life my husband had been living parallel to the one he shared with me. "Let's start with the gambling," Marcus said, pulling out the first stack of documents. $220,000. That's what Nathan owed to various entities, online betting sites, private poker games, loan sharks operating out of the North End. The documents showed years of losses, desperate attempts to recoup money by borrowing from increasingly dangerous people. "These aren't Wall Street poker buddies," Marcus said quietly. "These are organized crime connections. They're not going to wait forever for their money. He's in deep." Then came the embezzlement. $890,000 siphoned from his hedge fund clients over the course of 3 years. Hidden in secret accounts moved through shell companies buried under layers of false accounting. Marcus had found the trail by accessing financial records that Nathan thought were secure. "This is federal crime territory," Marcus said. "Wire fraud, theft of client funds. He could face serious prison time if the SEC gets involved." The affair was documented in detail. Hotel receipts from the Boston Harbor Hotel dinner reservations at expensive restaurants, intimate photographs that Jessica Hartwell had kept on her phone. 8 months of betrayal, each transaction a small confession. There was a secret bank account with $75,000 that Marcus couldn't fully explain. Maybe an escape fund. Maybe money set aside for something he hadn't yet done. And then there were the emails. Nathan had contacted a private DNA testing company. He'd asked specific questions about how to conduct a paternity test after birth, how to make the results legally admissible, how to use them as evidence in a family law case. He'd done his research carefully. He was planning to prove the baby wasn't his, Marcus said, and then use that to claim you'd committed adultery. Combined with the prenup you signed, he would have walked away with your money and probably custody. I stared at the emails, reading Nathan's words about my body, my baby, my future, all written as if I were an adversary to be defeated rather than a wife to be loved. "I need a lawyer," I said. Patricia had already arranged a meeting. Diane Rothschild's office was on the 40th floor of a downtown Boston high-rise with views of the harbor and the city sprawling out beneath glass and steel. Diane herself was a woman in her late 50s, with gray hair pulled back severely and eyes that had seen every variation of marital betrayal and destruction. "Your prenup is actually quite favorable to you," she said, spreading the document across her desk, specifically the infidelity clause. I'd forgotten about the infidelity clause. Nathan had insisted on it, claiming it was standard for people of our net worth. "The clause states," Diane continued, "that the spouse found to be unfaithful forfeits $500,000 to the faithful spouse. In this case, your husband is the unfaithful one. According to this contract, he owes you $500,000. "But that's," I started. "On top of that," Diane said, not letting me finish, "you have evidence of fraud. He deliberately deceived you about the nature of the IVF procedure. You have evidence of conspiracy. He bribed clinic staff. You have evidence of embezzlement, which he attempted to conceal from you. And you have evidence of infidelity, documented and proven." Diane leaned back in her chair. "He's not going to win. Not in court. Not in a custody battle. Not in anything. The evidence is overwhelming." "What do we do?" I asked. "We prepare a comprehensive case," Diane said. "We gather everything Marcus has found. We document every lie, every financial crime, every infidelity. We present it to him as leverage. He'll either settle or we go to trial and he'll lose everything." I thought of the baby. I thought of the life I was trying to protect. "I want to destroy him," I said quietly, "legally and publicly. I want everyone to know what he's done." Diane looked at me for a long moment. Then we'll do exactly that. But we need to be strategic. We don't reveal our hand yet. We let him think he still has leverage. We make him feel secure in his position, and then we strike. I went home that evening and looked at Nathan across our dinner table. He was checking his phone, barely acknowledging my presence. He'd grown colder in the past few days, more demanding. The pregnancy was showing my belly swollen and obvious, and I could see the disdain in his eyes when he looked at it. "I've been thinking," I said carefully, "about the baby, about our future." Nathan's eyes flickered up. "What about it?" "I think I might have been paranoid," I said, forcing the words out. "About Jessica, about the money. I think maybe pregnancy hormones really are affecting my judgment." Relief washed across his face. He reached over and took my hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm glad you see that now," he said. "I was worried about you, about your mental state." But his hand on mine felt like ice. Over the next week, his control tightened. He cut off my credit card, claiming it was a security measure. He started checking my phone, asking where I'd been and who I'd been with. He made subtle threats about custody, about what he could afford in terms of lawyers, about how a court might view a woman with mental health issues during a custody battle. I let him think he was winning. Every night I'd go to my room. Yes, he'd made me sleep separately, and I'd touch my belly and whisper to the baby, "We're going to be okay, I promise. We're going to be safe." I was no longer the woman who doubted herself. I wasn't the woman who accepted gaslighting and manipulation. I wasn't the woman who chose to believe her husband over her own intuition. I was strategic. I was prepared. I had evidence, legal counsel, a private investigator, and my mother's unwavering support. I was no longer a victim in Nathan's carefully constructed narrative. I was a hunter, and he had no idea what was coming. I brought it up on a Tuesday evening while Nathan was scrolling through his phone in the living room. "We need to talk about Jessica," I said quietly. Nathan's posture stiffened for just a moment. Then he set down his phone and looked at me with an expression of patient resignation, like I was a child bringing up an old wound he'd already explained away. "Victoria, we've already been through this. Jessica is a work colleague. Nothing happened between us." I nodded slowly, as if I was processing his words for the first time, as if I didn't have hotel receipts showing the Boston Harbor Hotel, as if I hadn't seen the intimate photos, as if I didn't have Marcus Sullivan's detailed timeline of every meeting, every meal, every night he told me he was working late. "I know," I said softly. "I know you explained it. I think I was just being paranoid. Pregnancy hormones, like you said." I watched his face change. Relief flooded across it like sunrise. He reached over and took my hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm glad you see that now," he said. "I was worried about you, about your mental state." "I'm sorry," I whispered, and I let him think those words meant something different than they did. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat in my separate bedroom and reviewed everything in my mind. $220,000 in gambling debts, $890,000 embezzled from his clients, $60,000 paid to clinic staff to swap sperm samples, $50,000 a loan to Emma, the DNA testing company emails, Jessica's hotel reservations, prenup infidelity clause $500,000 owed to me. He had no idea, not a single idea that I knew any of it. Over the next few days, I watched Nathan settle into his false security like it was a comfortable chair. He stopped checking my phone as obsessively. He seemed lighter somehow, as if a weight had lifted from him. He was already mentally writing the next chapter of his plan, the one where the DNA test proved his version of events, where I was cast as the unfaithful wife, where he walked away with everything. I could see it in the way he looked at my belly, not with love or anticipation, but with calculation. The baby wasn't his, and soon the world would know it. That baby was his insurance policy, his evidence, his weapon. He didn't know that I knew he'd orchestrated it. He didn't know that the woman he'd been trying to destroy had spent the last month building an impenetrable case against him. In his mind, he was 3 steps ahead. In reality, he was walking directly into the trap. I began preparing for the dinner. I called Patricia and asked her to arrange a family gathering. I told her I wanted to present a united front for Nathan's sake, that I thought the three of us should sit down and work through things. Nathan needed to feel like he was still winning, still in control, still ahead of the game. When I mentioned it to Nathan, his response was immediate. "I think that's a good idea," he said. "We should show we're committed to making this work, for the baby's sake." He had no idea that this work meant his complete destruction. I spent the days before the dinner in a strange state of calm. I moved through the house like a ghost preparing. I went to my prenatal appointments without him. Marcus came instead, bringing documents that Diane needed to review. I sat with Patricia in her kitchen drinking herbal tea, going over the evidence one more time. I talked to Diane on the phone about timing, about what we'd present first, about how to handle his inevitable denials. Every night I lay in my separate bedroom with my hand on my swollen belly, feeling the baby move beneath my palm. "We're almost there," I whispered. "Almost safe. Just a few more days." The baby kicked, and I took it as agreement. The night before the dinner, I couldn't sleep. Nathan slept soundly in his own bedroom, his phone on the nightstand, his face peaceful in the darkness. He looked like he didn't have a care in the world. He looked like a man who was winning. He looked like a man with no idea that his entire life was about to implode. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the desire for a baby, the failed first cycle, the hope of the second cycle, the joy of seeing 2 pink lines, 8 months of happiness that I'd built on a foundation of lies. And then layer by layer, the truth had unraveled the affair. The swap, the DNA test plan, the embezzlement, the gambling debts, the threats. 8 months of believing I was building a family when really my husband was building a trap. But he'd forgotten one crucial thing: he'd trapped himself. I got out of bed and went to stand at the window. Boston was glittering below me, full of people living their lives unaware of the drama playing out in one penthouse apartment. My mother was out there somewhere, sleeping peacefully for the first time in months because she'd finally told me the truth. Marcus was home with his family, secure in the knowledge that he'd done his job. Diane was probably reviewing documents one more time, confident in her strategy. I was surrounded by people who believed in me, people who had evidence, people who knew exactly what needed to happen. Nathan had only himself, his arrogance, his lies, his miscalculation that I would never discover the truth. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, he would sit down at a table thinking he was in control, thinking he still had the upper hand, thinking that his DNA test would be the proof he needed. Tomorrow, he would learn that I'd known all along. The morning arrived, gray and cool October, bleeding into November. Nathan woke up in good spirits. I could hear him in the shower practically whistling. He emerged dressed in an expensive suit as if he was preparing for a business meeting rather than a family dinner. He was going to present himself as the concerned father, the wronged husband, the man trying to hold things together. He kissed my forehead, a gesture that made my skin crawl, and said, "This is going to go well. I can feel it." He had no idea. He didn't know about the investigator's files. He didn't know about the lawyer's strategy. He didn't know about the prenup clause that worked in my favor. He didn't know about Emma's guilt finally overcome, or Marcus's meticulous documentation, or Diane's 25 years of experience taking down men exactly like him. He didn't know that his wife, the woman he'd tried to manipulate, frame, and destroy, was about to show him exactly what she was capable of. As he left for work that morning, I stood at the window and placed my hand on my belly one final time. "Tonight," I whispered to the baby inside me, "tonight we take our life back." The baby kicked, and I smiled because I knew exactly what was coming. I knew that when Nathan walked into that restaurant tonight, he would still believe he was the predator. What he had no idea about was that he was actually the prey. The invitation arrived at Nathan's office on a Tuesday afternoon, printed on cream-colored cardstock with elegant lettering. I'd had Patricia help me design it something sophisticated, something that suggested reconciliation rather than confrontation. "You are cordially invited to a family dinner celebrating new beginnings. Date October 28th, 2023. Location Boston Harbor Hotel, Rose Wharf. Private dining room. Time 7 o'clock p.m. Dress smart casual. RSVP Victoria." When Nathan read it, I watched his face from across the room. Relief. Satisfaction. The look of a man who believed he'd successfully manipulated his wife into surrendering. "This is good," he said, folding the invitation carefully. "This is really good. I'll be there." He had no idea that every element had been orchestrated. He had no idea that the invitation itself was bait. The Boston Harbor Hotel sat on Rose Wharf overlooking the water, all glass and steel and refined elegance. It was the kind of place you chose when you wanted to impress people, the kind of place where business deals were made and marriages were reconciled, or destroyed in this case. Patricia and I arrived early along with Diane and Marcus. The private dining room was stunning, a long table, set with white linens, crystal glasses, candles flickering softly in the center. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the harbor, Boston glittering beyond. 30 guests, Patricia confirmed, reviewing the list one more time. Everyone who matters will be here. Olivia arrived next, followed by Emma. Emma looked nervous. She'd been dreading this day for months, but she knew it was necessary. She'd worn a dark dress, her hair pulled back severely, her face pale but determined. "You're going to be okay," I told her quietly. "After tonight, you're going to be okay." She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "Thank you for giving me the chance to do this right." Thomas Mitchell, the district attorney, arrived with 2 assistant prosecutors. He was a man in his early 50s, with the bearing of someone who'd seen the absolute worst humanity had to offer and had learned not to flinch. "We have everything we need," he said simply. "The evidence is airtight. Fraud, conspiracy, embezzlement, wire fraud. This is going to be straightforward." Outside the hotel, police officers were positioned discreetly. They knew the signal. They knew what to expect. They knew that when this dinner was over, they would likely be making an arrest. Marcus moved through the room one final time, checking exits, confirming sightlines, ensuring that every camera angle was covered. He'd arranged for recording equipment entirely legal, since multiple people in the room had consented to documentation. "Everything's in place," he told me quietly. "When you're ready, we're ready." By 6:45 p.m., guests began to arrive. Victoria's colleagues from the design firm, friends from college, extended family members, people who had no idea what was about to unfold, people who thought they were coming to a reconciliation dinner between a husband and wife, people who would bear witness to the moment everything changed. And then Nathan arrived. He walked in wearing an expensive suit, his hair perfectly styled, his smile confident. He was performing the role of the concerned husband, the man trying to hold his marriage together. He greeted people warmly, asked about their families, made small talk with genuine ease. He was good at this, the performance. He'd had years to perfect it. When he saw me, his expression softened into something that almost looked like genuine affection. "You look beautiful," he said, kissing my cheek. "I'm so glad we're doing this." So am I said quietly, and I meant it, just not in the way he thought. Dinner began at 7:15 p.m. The first course arrived, a delicate salad with seasonal vegetables. Wine was poured. Conversation flowed naturally around the table. People laughed. People toasted the baby. People spoke about the future with genuine warmth. Nathan was in his element. He held court, telling charming stories, appearing engaged and loving. He placed his hand on my belly at one point, a gesture so practiced and false that I had to hide my reaction. Several people smiled at the display of affection. They didn't know it was theater. By the second course, pan-seared fish with seasonal vegetables, Nathan was ready for his moment. He stood, his wine glass raised, and the room quieted respectfully. "I want to say something." He began, his voice steady and sincere. "I want to thank Victoria for organizing this evening, for being willing to work through our challenges, for believing in us." He paused dramatically, letting the moment breathe. "We're going to have a beautiful baby," he continued, "and I'm going to be the best father I can be. I'm going to provide for my family, I'm going to protect them, and I'm going to make sure that nothing comes between us." It was a perfect speech, sincere, emotional, completely calculated. Several people wiped their eyes. Patricia's expression didn't change. Olivia smiled politely. Emma looked away. Diane's hand tightened around her wine glass. Marcus observed from his position near the wall, utterly still. To family, Nathan concluded, raising his glass. To new beginnings. To family. Everyone echoed clinking glasses. Nathan sat back down, satisfied. He'd made his play. He'd reminded everyone in Victoria of what he wanted them to believe about him. The third course arrived. More conversation, more laughter, more of the performance. I moved through it all in a state of strange calm. I'd anticipated this moment for weeks. I'd rehearsed it in my mind 100 times. I knew what was about to happen. I knew how Nathan would react. I knew that the police were outside waiting. I knew that Thomas Mitchell was sitting at the far end of the table, quiet and observant, waiting for his moment. By the time dessert arrived, a chocolate mousse with fresh berries, the tension in the room had begun to shift slightly. Not everyone felt it yet, but those who knew what was coming could sense it. The anticipation building beneath the surface civility. I waited until people had mostly finished their dessert, until the waiters had cleared the plates, until there was a natural lull in conversation. Then I stood up. The room quieted immediately. All eyes turned toward me, the pregnant woman in the navy dress standing at the head of the table, her hand resting on her belly. Nathan's expression was still confident. He thought I was about to make a speech of my own. He thought I was about to publicly declare my commitment to our marriage. He had no idea what was actually about to happen. I need to say something, I said, my voice clear and steady. Something that everyone in this room needs to hear. The color began to drain from Nathan's face. Something in my tone, something he'd never heard from me before, was triggering his instincts. His predatory instincts, the ones that recognized danger. 9 months ago. I continued. My husband orchestrated an elaborate scheme to destroy me, to destroy my future, to destroy the baby I'm carrying. Nathan stood up abruptly. Victoria, what are you— Sit down, I said quietly, and something in my voice made him obey. Around the table, people were beginning to understand that this wasn't going to be a reconciliation dinner. They were beginning to understand that they'd been invited here to witness something far darker. Outside the hotel, police officers received their signal. Inside the private dining room, the moment had arrived. Everything I had prepared for, everything everyone in this room had worked toward, everything was about to unfold. And Nathan finally understood that he'd walked directly into the most carefully constructed trap of his life. I stood slowly and the room quieted immediately. Every eye turned toward me. Every fork was set down. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. I want to share something about my marriage, I said, my voice steady and clear across the elegant dining room of Boston Harbor Hotel. Nathan's face was a study in confusion. He still thought he had leverage. He still thought this was going according to his plan. He had no idea what was about to happen. My husband has been committing federal crimes, I continued, and I have the documentation to prove it. The first set of documents began making its way around the table. Bank statements, wire transfers, account records showing money moved through shell companies and hidden accounts. $890,000, I said. That's how much my husband has stolen from his clients, his hedge fund clients. Money that was supposed to be managed on their behalf, invested carefully, grown thoughtfully. I paused, letting the numbers sink in. Instead, he moved it to personal accounts. He hid it in shell companies. He created false documentation to cover his tracks. He committed wire fraud on a massive scale. A woman near the middle of the table gasped. She was one of Nathan's former colleagues, someone who'd worked with him, trusted him with her investments. Nathan stood up abruptly. This is completely out of context. These documents don't show— Every dollar is documented, I said calmly. Every transfer is traceable. The FBI has been investigating for 6 months. That's when Thomas Mitchell stepped forward. He was still imposing, radiating the weight of prosecutorial authority. I'm Thomas Mitchell, District Attorney, he announced. We have federal crimes here, wire fraud, theft of client funds. The FBI is conducting a formal investigation into Mr. Blackwell's activities. Nathan's face lost all remaining color. He was calculating, now I could see it. calculating the scope of what was happening, calculating that this wasn't just a personal confrontation, this was law enforcement. "There's more," I continued. I nodded to one of the servers who began distributing the next set of photographs: hotel receipts, restaurant bills, photographs of my husband with another woman. "My husband has been having an affair," I said simply, "for 8 months, with Jessica Hartwell." As if on cue, Jessica walked into the private dining room. She'd been waiting in an adjacent room brought here by police. She moved calmly to stand near me, not near Nathan. Her presence alone was confirmation. Nathan's voice cracked. "Victoria, stop this. This is ridiculous. Is it?" I asked. "Is it ridiculous to have hotel receipts? Is it ridiculous to have photographs? Is it ridiculous to have text messages where he tells her he loves her?" I held up my phone, showing the messages everyone at the table could read. The intimacy, the planning, the betrayal laid bare in blue text bubbles. Jessica spoke quietly, her voice steady. "He told me he was leaving you. He told me you didn't understand him." She stopped shaking her head. I was lied to as well. The guests were passing the photographs now, examining them with expressions that ranged from shock to anger to sad recognition. Here was the man they'd toasted just minutes ago. Here was the devoted husband caught in intimate moments with another woman in hotel rooms around Boston. Patricia was watching with an expression of quiet vindication. She'd known. She'd tried to warn me, and now in front of 30 witnesses, her daughter was being vindicated. Nathan attempted damage control. Jessica means nothing. This was just a moment of weakness. I was stressed about what? I interrupted. About your gambling debts. I distributed the next set of documents: betting website accounts, online casino records, emails from loan sharks, actual organized crime figures demanding payment, threatening emails about what would happen if Nathan didn't pay. $220,000, I said. That's what you owe to people who are not patient, people who have connections, people who have made very clear what they're willing to do to collect. Thomas Mitchell stepped closer. "Mr. Blackwell's gambling debts connect him to individuals under federal investigation." Nathan was backing away now, his hands raised. "This is entrapment. You planned this. I documented the truth," I said quietly. "That's all I did." Diane Rothschild stood, her presence commanding attention. She was a woman who'd seen this play out 100 times before, and she moved with the confidence of someone who always won. "There's also the matter of the prenuptial agreement," Diane announced, holding up the document, specifically the infidelity clause. She read directly from the page. "In the event that either party engages in infidelity, the unfaithful party shall forfeit $500,000 to the faithful party." She looked directly at Nathan. "You signed this agreement. You insisted on this clause. And according to this documentation, you are the unfaithful party, which means you owe Victoria $500,000. I watched as the realization spread across Nathan's face. He didn't have leverage anymore. He didn't have ammunition. He didn't have a single card left to play. The guests were looking at him now with expressions ranging from disgust to pity. The man they'd come to support was revealed to be a criminal, an adulterer, a liar. Jessica was crying quietly. Emma was standing with her arms wrapped around herself, witnessing the man who'd threatened her now being exposed publicly. Patricia placed her hand on my shoulder, squeezing gently, a gesture that said everything. "But there's one final thing," I said, and I felt the room tense. I looked at Emma, who nodded. I looked at Thomas Mitchell, who was ready. I looked at Patricia, who gave me the smallest nod of encouragement. I turned back to Nathan, whose face had gone beyond pale into a sickly shade of gray. "The baby I'm carrying isn't yours," I said clearly. "You paid $110,000 to commit fertility fraud. You paid Emma Rodriguez to replace your sperm sample with a donor sample. You paid an embryologist to facilitate it. You paid a donor for his biological material." The room fell completely silent. "You did all of this without my knowledge or consent. You did it while we were trying for a baby. You did it while I was vulnerable." I pulled out the final set of documents. And then you plan to use a DNA test after the baby was born to frame me for infidelity. I read from his email, I need a confidential DNA test performed immediately after birth. I need results that prove the child is not biologically mine. This is for custody proceedings. Emma stepped forward, her voice clear. He paid me to participate in this. He threatened my career if I ever told. I'm cooperating with federal investigators. Thomas Mitchell pulled out handcuffs. Nathan Blackwell, you're under arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, fertility fraud, insurance fraud, and obstruction of justice. Nathan tried to run. He didn't make it 2 steps before federal agents blocked the exit. You have the right to remain silent, Thomas began, and I stopped listening. I was watching Patricia pull me into her arms. I was watching Olivia cry. I was watching the other guests realize they'd nearly been part of a cover-up. I was watching my husband, the man I'd trusted, the man I'd married, the man I'd carried a child for, finally understand that his entire world was over. The agents placed the handcuffs on him. He didn't resist. He was too shocked to resist. As they led him toward the door, he looked back at me one last time. I didn't look away. If you're still here with me, type 1 in the comments. That means you believe me. That means you're staying for the ending. Before we continue, the next part contains some fictionalized details for privacy and storytelling. But the crimes, the investigation, and the justice, that's all real. Ready to see how this ends? But the most sinister thing he did, I continued, my voice cutting through the stunned silence, was plan this entire scheme. Emma Rodriguez stood slowly. She was trembling, but her voice was steady. I was bribed, she said. I was paid $50,000 to swap Nathan's sperm sample with a donor's sample during the IVF cycle. The room erupted in gasps. Emma held up the documents, the contract, the payment receipt, the emails between Nathan and James Mitchell, the embryologist. The embryologist was paid $35,000, Emma continued. The donor Derek Sykes was paid $25,000. Total bribery $110,000. I stood and held up a stack of emails. These are messages between my husband and a DNA testing company. Let me read them to you. I began reading Nathan's own words aloud. Schedule DNA test immediately after birth. Need to establish non-paternity. Will use results as evidence in divorce proceedings. Need to prove wife committed adultery. Another email. Plan to use infidelity clause in prenup to recover assets. Wife will be left with nothing. Must act quickly before she suspects. The color drained from every face in the room. Even the people who didn't know the full story now understood. Nathan hadn't just had an affair. He hadn't just stolen money. He had orchestrated an elaborate, multi-layered conspiracy to destroy his pregnant wife. Diane Rothschild stood her presence commanding the room's attention. Mr. Blackwell. She said, her voice cold and professional. You are facing charges of fraud conspiracy to commit fraud embezzlement of client funds and wire fraud. Federal wire fraud carries a penalty of up to 20 years. Add conspiracy, add embezzlement, add the organized crime connections, and you are looking at significant prison time. Nathan was shaking now. His face had gone beyond pale into something almost translucent. Patricia stood slowly. When she spoke, her voice was filled with a mother's protective rage. You attempted to destroy my daughter. She said her words precise and cutting. While she was pregnant, while she was vulnerable, while she was trusting you to care for her. She paused and I saw tears in her eyes, tears of vindication and fury. But you didn't count on one thing, she continued. You didn't count on her fighting back. You didn't count on her being stronger than you. You didn't count on her choosing justice over silence. She sat back down and I squeezed her hand. Nathan attempted to stand. His voice came out hoarse and desperate. Victoria, please, he said. I love you. We can work this out. Let me explain. Our baby is not yours, I said calmly, and that was your choice. Nathan took a step toward me, reaching out. Before he could get close, 2 police officers moved forward, positioning themselves between us. Nathan's voice rose, becoming frantic. "You can't do this to me. I'm the father. We're a family. Victoria, please." "No, Nathan," I said, my voice steady and final. "You forfeited that right when you decided to destroy me." The officers approached him directly. "Nathan Blackwell." Officer Torres said, her voice official and clear. "You are under arrest for fraud conspiracy to commit fraud embezzlement of client funds and wire fraud." Officer Chen began reading Nathan's Miranda rights as his partner pulled his hands behind his back and secured the handcuffs with professional efficiency. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you." Nathan was struggling now, not violently, but with the desperation of a man watching his carefully constructed world collapse. "This is insane," he shouted. "All of you are insane. This is entrapment. This is—" "Let's go," Officer Torres said quietly, and they began escorting him toward the exit. As Nathan passed by our table, he made one final attempt at manipulation. "Victoria, I'm sorry," he pleaded. "Please, I love you. We can fix this. For the baby." I looked him directly in the eye, and then I said the words that would be my last to him. "Goodbye, Nathan." I didn't look away. I didn't soften. I didn't waver. I simply watched as the man I'd married, the man I'd trusted, the man who'd tried to destroy me, was led out of the restaurant in handcuffs. The door closed behind him. For a long moment, the room was absolutely silent. Then Olivia stood and began to clap. Slowly, deliberately, other guests joined in. It wasn't celebratory, it was something deeper. It was recognition. It was acknowledgement. It was women and men standing together to say, "We see you. We believe you. Justice has been served." Patricia squeezed my hand tighter. Emma was crying, but there was relief in her tears now. The burden she'd carried for so long was finally lifted. Thomas Mitchell nodded to me with professional respect. His investigation had yielded results. Now came the prosecution. Diane began collecting her documents, her expression satisfied. The legal battle was just beginning, but she knew we all knew exactly how it would end. I placed my hand on my swollen belly and whispered something only the baby could hear. "We're safe now," I said. "We're finally safe." And in that moment, surrounded by people who believed me by evidence that vindicated me by justice that was being served, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. The door had barely closed behind Nathan when Patricia pulled me into her arms. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," she whispered into my hair. "So incredibly proud." I let myself cry, then not tears of fear or anger, but tears of release. Tears of finally being believed. Tears of finally being safe. Olivia was there squeezing my shoulder. "You are a true boss," she said simply. "Seriously, that was incredible." Emma approached hesitantly, her own face streaked with tears. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "Thank you for believing me. Thank you for fighting. I've been carrying that guilt for so long, and thank you." I pulled her into a hug. "You told the truth when it mattered most," I told her. "That takes courage." Marcus came over and shook my hand firmly. "Case closed," he said. "Well done, Victoria. Really well done." Diane was already collecting her documents, her expression satisfied. "The divorce will be finalized quickly," she told me. "He has no leverage now, no cards left to play. You keep everything, the assets, the company, the house, all of it." I nodded, but I wasn't thinking about the money. I was thinking about the baby, about safety, about the future. 3 months later, I was in a hospital room at Brigham and Women's Hospital, and my mother was holding my hand. "You're doing beautifully," the midwife said. "One more push. Come on, Victoria." Patricia squeezed my hand. "You've got this, baby. You've got this." And then she was here. A perfect, healthy baby girl, 7 pounds 3 ounces, with a strong cry and dark hair, and 10 perfect fingers and toes. I held her for the first time, and something inside me healed. "She's absolutely perfect," Patricia whispered, tears streaming down her face. I looked at my daughter, at this baby who wasn't Nathan's, who was biologically Derek Sykes's child, but who was entirely, completely, undeniably mine, and I made a promise. Yes, I said, and she's safe. We named her Grace. I chose the name deliberately. Grace meaning forgiveness, but also strength. Grace meaning the unmerited favor of love. Grace meaning the ability to move forward even after being broken. Looking at Grace in those early days, I understood something fundamental. This baby didn't carry Nathan's DNA, but she carried my love. She didn't carry his protection, but she carried mine. She wasn't born from his devotion, but from my determination to survive, to fight, to protect her at all costs. I held her while she slept, and I whispered to her about the world she'd been born into, about the people who'd fought for her, about the love that would surround her. Patricia was there for all of it. My mother who'd warned me, who'd investigated behind the scenes, who'd fought for me without judgment, who'd become not just my parent, but my ally, my protector, my example of strength. She held Grace and she cried happy tears. "Welcome to the world, beautiful girl," she whispered. "Your mother is the strongest woman I know, and we're going to make sure you know that too." 6 months after Grace's birth, Nathan's trial concluded. He was convicted on all counts: embezzlement of client funds, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, 8 years in federal prison, restitution of $890,000 to his defrauded clients' money he didn't have and would never be able to pay, the infidelity clause of the prenup, $750,000 owed to me money he didn't have and would never be able to pay. The divorce was finalized. I kept everything: the penthouse, the company, my inheritance, my assets, my future. Diane handled it all with professional efficiency, and when it was done, she called me personally. "He tried to destroy you," she said simply. "Instead, he destroyed himself. Justice doesn't always work this cleanly, Victoria, but when it does, it's satisfying." I'd also made sure that Emma was protected legally. Victoria had helped secure her position at the clinic, ensuring that her cooperation with the investigation didn't result in professional retaliation. Emma had been a victim too, threatened, manipulated, forced into complicity. But she'd chosen truth in the end, and I wasn't going to let her suffer for it. 1 year after the dinner at Boston Harbor Hotel, I was standing in my penthouse watching Grace play on a soft rug near the window. October 2024. Grace's first birthday. She was a year old now, toddling, laughing, exploring the world with fearless joy. Patricia was there, watching her with the devotion of a grandmother who'd earned the title through presence, not just blood. We'd called her Grandmother Patricia for so long now that it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Olivia was there too, with a birthday cake she'd decorated herself. We called her Aunt Olivia now because that's what she'd become. A friend elevated to family through crisis and support. Emma had come to the birthday party too, bringing a gift and genuine joy at Grace's milestone. She'd continued working at the clinic, her reputation restored, her guilt absolved. Victoria had made sure of that. That morning, I'd received a letter from Marcus Sullivan. "Your ex-husband's cellmate is not exactly friendly. He's doing okay in prison, if okay means eating cafeteria food and sharing a cell with someone who doesn't particularly like him. Federal prison isn't Club Med Victoria. Justice has a way of catching up with people like him. Thought you'd want to know. Marcus." I'd smiled at that. Not with satisfaction at his suffering, but with relief that he was no longer a threat, that he was contained, that he couldn't hurt anyone else. Now watching Grace play, I felt Patricia's hand on my shoulder. "She's going to grow up surrounded by so much love," Patricia said softly. I placed my hand over hers. "Because of you. Because you didn't give up on me. Because you fought." "We all fought," Patricia said. "Olivia, Emma, Marcus, Diane. All of us saw something in you worth fighting for." I picked up Grace and held her on my hip, pointing out the window to the Boston Harbor spread below us. "Do you see that, Grace?" I asked her. "That's our city. That's where we fought. That's where we won." Grace babbled, reached for the window, laughed that pure, untainted laugh that only babies and small children possess. I pulled her close and whispered something only she could hear. Family isn't determined by DNA, I told her. Family is the people who stay, who fight, who believe in you when you're doubting yourself. Your grandmother, Patricia, she warned me and never gave up. Your Aunt Olivia, she validated my instincts when I needed them most. Emma, she chose truth over fear. And me, I chose you. I chose us. We're a family, Grace. Not because of blood, but because of love. Grace rested her head on my shoulder and I looked out at the view, the harbor, the city, the future stretching ahead of us. Victoria Thornton, CEO, mother, survivor, victor. I'd come into this year carrying a baby I thought was my husband's trust that was misplaced and hoped that seemed foolish. I was leaving it with a daughter who was entirely mine in every way that mattered. With a mother who'd been proven right and had loved me anyway. With a circle of women who'd become my family through crisis, with justice served and a future secured. Nathan was in federal prison serving his time paying his debt. The company was thriving under my leadership. My inheritance was safe. My daughter was healthy and loved and protected. Everything he'd tried to destroy, I'd saved. Everything he'd tried to take, I kept. Everything he'd tried to corrupt, I'd made pure through truth. Patricia came and stood beside me at the window. We stood there together, grandmother and mother, watching Grace play, watching the sun set over Boston, watching the beginning of a new life. "Thank you," I said quietly. "For what?" Patricia asked. "For being right," I said. "For fighting. For never giving up on me." Patricia squeezed my hand. "That's what mothers do. We protect our daughters. We believe them. We fight for them." She paused, then added, "And I raised a daughter who protects her own daughter, who fights for herself, who believes in justice. That's the greatest thing I could have done." I pulled her close and we stood there, 3 generations of women looking out at a future built on truth, protected by love, and secured by the strength we'd found in each other. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes family is the people who stay when everything falls apart. Family is the people who believe you when the world is telling you that you're crazy. Family is the people who fight beside you when you're too tired to fight alone. Family is Patricia, who warned me and was proven right. Family is Olivia, who validated my instincts. Family is Emma, who chose truth over fear. Family is Grace, born into a world of love and protection. Family is the strength we found in each other and the justice we served together. And sometimes the strongest families aren't made of DNA at all. They're made of courage. They're made of truth. They're made of love in its purest, fiercest, most protective form. I looked down at Grace asleep in my arms as the sun set over Boston, and I smiled. We'd made it through, all of us, and we were finally, completely, absolutely safe. When I look back at my story, at the woman I was when I married Nathan, at the victim I became, at the survivor I fought to be, I see someone who almost lost everything because she chose to ignore her instincts. So here's my warning to you. Don't be like me. Don't dismiss the red flags. Don't accept the explanations. Don't let someone tell you that your doubt is just pregnancy hormones or paranoia. Your intuition is God speaking to you. Listen to it. I learned that family betrayal cuts deeper than any knife. I learned that family revenge, the kind where you fight back with truth and justice, heals you in ways nothing else can. I learned that family betrayal through financial abuse is a weapon designed to control you completely. But here's what changed me, understanding that family revenge isn't about vengeance. It's about reclaiming your power. Family revenge means choosing truth over silence. Family revenge means protecting yourself and your children with everything you have. God showed me the truth when I couldn't see it myself. God gave me the strength to fight back. God surrounded me with people who believed me when I doubted myself. Financial abuse is real. Emotional manipulation is real, but so is your strength. Your mother might be right even when you don't want to hear it. Your friends matter more than you realize. And justice, real justice, comes when you stop protecting the person who hurt you and start protecting yourself. If you're in a situation like mine, please know you don't have to stay. You don't have to accept control disguised as love. You can fight back. You can win. Family betrayal taught me what real family means, and family revenge taught me what real power looks like. Your story doesn't have to end like mine almost did. Final disclaimer. This story contains dramatized storytelling elements for educational purposes. Some details are fictional, but the core lessons about recognizing financial abuse and emotional manipulation are real. If this content style isn't right for you, no problem at all. Please seek content that better fits your needs.